What's up YouTube? We're back with the Media Empire series. Today we're discussing the content tsunami of how you can leverage what you've built so far to absolutely explode all over the internet with not just written content, but across multiple social platforms and some new exciting channels for you to use. Let's dive into it. Hey everyone, Gregory L. Frank here, Director of Marketing at Empire Flippers, and today we are discussing the content tsunami. It's going to be awesome. This is the power of what you've been building. It's all been leading up to this. Well, I shouldn't say all leading up to this because there's actually more stuff to do after this, but this is a very exciting moment in your business where your systems that you built to create leverage actually start scaling. So the first thing is scaling your content. Now we want to take our basic system that we discussed in the previous video and start scaling our writers. At this point, we may want to start moving away from the content mills and start looking to hire actual passionate freelancers using the same exact strategy you use for your content manager. These freelancers ideally should have passionate experience in your niche, because that way you can also make them do double duty where they can act as almost mini content managers eventually operating underneath your main head honcho content manager. And that will allow you to again use those content mills even better to expand your content production even more dramatically, right? So that is the first step. And these freelancers can also move into new content types. One of the best parts about using these freelancers is the fact that you can have them do different kinds of content. Now, up to now, you've been focused on mainly informational content and commercial content such as buyer guides and reviews, right? Usually very keyword centric, very SEO heavy. Now we're starting to move out of that where you can use the freelancers that are passionate about your niche to discuss things that the content mills just simply can't. And the best thing, the absolute best thing you can do at this stage is creating data-driven content. Now, data-driven content is something most people don't do because they feel like it's very difficult to do, that it's hard. And yes, it can be, but it's for this very reason why you will be able to turbocharge your magazine from just being a brochure trying to act like a magazine to becoming something that has actual thought leadership, because you will be able to present real data to your audience that they ideally care about. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can ideally, like the best way to have it is create the data yourself. So for us, we create data all the time whenever someone buys or sells a business, and we have real data that no one else has access to, right? Average days on market, the time it took to sell, right? The average days on market. Most people don't know that. The actual sales price, the actual terms of the earnouts, the percentages of the earnouts, right? All this is our industry report, by the way. You can download in the link below. It's a huge ebook, right? Anyhow, this kind of data, first party data, is extremely powerful to set you apart, but you don't need it. It's not a requirement that you have this. This is just the best. Other ways you can create data is by surveying your audience, because you've been building out an email list, right? And surveys can be extremely powerful. Now, there are biases within surveys. There are problems with surveys. They're not always the best, but they can glean really good insights if you build it well. You can ask your audience certain kind of questions and then take that data and interpret it as long as you have someone who understands the niche. You can never give this data to a content mill writer because they won't know the niche well enough to interpret the data. Like if I see, for example, that multiples or businesses that have a steady business tend to have a higher multiple versus a business that is growing, that's an interesting insight. But if I give that to a content mill writer, they won't know what to do with that. All they can say is exactly what I just said. Now, because I understand my niche, I can say I think buyers value stability over growth at a certain pricing tier, because growth has dangers and hidden dangers in it when growing a business that most people don't think about, but buyers do think about. They often want the stability, and that gives them the option to grow if they want to, and to enter into the dangerous waters of growth that it can be produced, right? And I know all this stuff. So when I see that data point, I am able to make actual interesting, calculated interpretations because I happen to know the niche. That's why it's very important at this stage you start hiring actual thought leadership. If you haven't already done it with your content manager and the freelance writers I just mentioned, now is the time to start doing it so you can create these data-driven pieces. So no one does this, at least in the affiliate site space. Some e-commerce businesses utilize it, and SaaS businesses, I think SaaS businesses probably do the best at utilizing data-driven research, but you can use this no matter what niche you're in. People love cool data, especially if it's expressed in a cool way. There's entire websites and subreddits dedicated to the beauty of data as visualized in various graphs, right? And a lot of the stuff that they show aren't that interesting. Like how many times do you walk across a sidewalk on average in someone's life, right? I mean, there is interesting, I guess. It's not that useful, but people love that stuff because it is fascinating trivia, right? So it doesn't have to be something hard hitting. It could be just something small and fascinating trivia like that. And you can create this and it will separate you from the entire pack. This will separate you more than just doing like video or podcast content. Like that stuff will separate you greatly too. But even there, it's very rare to find a podcaster or YouTuber that's going to be using real data. Like you can check out my data series when the videos were way less produced than they are now. Hello, editor. Thank you for doing a good job. When I was editing it, or I had another editor on it who wasn't like familiar with YouTube editing, but those videos are some of my higher viewed videos despite the lower production value because we were using real data. People wanted to know, what does the data say? So data is extremely powerful. And the last thing I'll say on this is just because you spend all this time to create one blog post or article or video or whatever with the data doesn't mean that's the end of the shelf life of what you can use that data for. We are starting to create data vaults and story vaults at Empire Flippers for my content team. And basically what this is it takes those data pieces, puts them in a few TLDR bullet points or special stories of customers of ours, and our content specialists can open up that spreadsheet, see a bunch of stories organized based off different relevance to our audiences, and start sprinkling that information into their content. Because when you start doing that across your content, not just one content piece, but now it's like a line or 2 lines or maybe even a paragraph in all the other pieces of content you produce, that builds more authority. It also sends a lot of people back to your data piece, which is often going to be the best piece on your blog. Not always, but often it is. So it builds more authority. More authority leads to higher conversions, whether it's email subscribers or people actually clicking an affiliate link to actually pay you something, right? So you can use this data, this upfront work you did, and it'll keep paying dividends for you. So this is an extremely important use of your time. So let's go jump from creating data to how to do content repurposing, which I kind of just already mentioned right there, right? By using the data you produce in that blog post in other blog posts, you are effectively repurposing that work and giving it more ammo to do some good work for your business. But let's talk about content repurposing real quick as a general business practice here. All right, let's talk about content repurposing. So content repurposing at its basic level is taking one piece of content, doing some tweaks to it, and then spreading it across tons of different social media platforms or other places where you can post your content. So like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, SlideShare, all that kind of stuff. Now, content repurposing has a storied history in the content marketing world as being this holy grail of amazing results. Like, oh my God, you're going to stretch out the lifespan of your content dramatically and it's going to be awesome and all this good stuff. We do content repurposing. And let me tell you, it kind of does work. It kind of works and it kind of doesn't work. So this is like, I wouldn't say it's an optional step. I think you should definitely do it. And I think it helps with brand awareness. But in terms of actually driving a lot of leads and stuff like that, simply posting and dumping the same thing across all of social media is not super effective. But remember, that's okay because it still has some efficacy. As long as we can make sure that our content repurposing system is relatively streamlined and doesn't take up a lot of our time or resources, then it's still worth doing, even if it's not as effective as people say it is. Now, you could make content repurposing extremely effective if you understand the platform so well, you understand how to tweak that main pillar piece of content, like a blog, into a powerful video or into a powerful social media post that you know, based off of your expertise in that platform, will perform well. And that's how you can make content repurposing actually really sing, is if you understand the platform very in depth. But in order for you to do that across all platforms, you're basically basically going to need at least a generalist social media expert to help you out, and ideally a social media expert that really specializes in that one social media. But don't worry, let's not go there yet. That's overcomplicating it, and we can do that later. Let's just get what we need out there first, because even though it's not super effective, it will still be very effective in the sense that it is driving traffic, leads, subscribers, and sales to us. And that's what we really want. We want the MVP. So what we want to do is look at our pillar content. So say a blog article, and we want to take segments, little snippets of content out of that and repurpose it for, say, Facebook or LinkedIn. Now, we can do this in many different ways. We could do it as quotes. So you have a picture of the person who wrote the content, is usually the most common, with the quote. And when you do this, you want to make sure the quote is self-contained. We've made this mistake in the past. You will probably make this mistake too, because sometimes it takes a little nuance to understand context. And the problem with not knowing context is if you have a quote that says something like, if you sell more businesses, you're going to make more money. While yes, that is true, it doesn't offer a lot of value in a vacuum. Like in the actual blog post where I say something like that, that might make sense and be a really hard-hitting, great line to say, right? Because of the context that is surrounding the quote. But when it comes to the actual social media post, it needs to be self-contained. So whatever snippet you do choose to take out of your main piece, just remember, it needs to be self-contained. People are seeing it in a vacuum. They don't understand the context that was around it on the core piece. So keep that in mind. So quotes are a big one. Long form paragraphs tend to work okay on Facebook and LinkedIn. And sometimes just like a hard hitting quote that leads directly to a link to the blog post can be good too. Now we want to have the same kind of mentality here as we do with our email, which is that 7-to-1 ratio. Now it doesn't have to be 7-to-1 all the time. You can find out what works best in your niche, of course, but whatever ratio you do discover, it should always be value-led overwhelmingly on the value side and very little on the promotional side, especially on social media. Like you might even want to go higher on that ratio, because social media is very difficult to promote things well and adequately if you don't know what you're doing, versus value-led things, people eat it up, at least when organic traffic works, which right now most social media, the organic traffic is going down across most platforms. So with that said, that's content repurposing in a nutshell. One last thing I'll note on content repurposing is every time you post something inside of your social media, keep a spreadsheet or some kind of almost like a CRM database of these posts that you can keep track of the stats. Because if you see an organic post that gets a ton of organic engagement for some reason, and you're like, it can be hard to understand why, like it's difficult to analyze why did that happen. You know, we can make up a bunch of theories, but you're going to run into pieces of content that just do better than other pieces, and it's not always clear why. But you want to know what pieces actually did do better, so that way you can then promote them. Now, this might not be the right stage for this, but down the road, when you have those pieces of content that really flare up organically, you can give them a boost with some paid social ads. Usually a cheap budget of like $5-10 a day is usually fine to get that piece out there. And another thing to note on this, you want leverage on this, right? You don't want to fall into the trap of the social media grind, because each post will have a shelf life of 30 seconds to maybe 5 minutes. Most social media posts never get any traction whatsoever and are doomed to die in a desolate land where no one ever sees it, right? So we want to put our best effort forward where we can scale ourselves. We're using technology. So some of the best social media schedulers out there in our view are companies like Loomly and Agora Pulse. And the reason why they're so great is because you can actually schedule content where it's published once, but then it gets put into a loop where it gets published again. So you want this loop constantly going. The more you schedule evergreen content, the bigger your loop becomes, where it's automatically posting all of this content for you all the time, to the point where, yes, you might have a shelf life on that tweet of 20 seconds, But guess what? You have like 50 other tweets scheduled throughout the day at good intervals. Don't do it right after one another, whereas posting evergreen content all the time. Again, this is not super efficient in terms of results, because you can do it much better if you have a deeper nuance of the platform. But for where we're at this stage, this is good enough to get some meaningful results where you can leverage tools of automation to help you grow the business. All right, guys, so that's the initial part of the content tsunami. And one other thing on content repurposing, I know I keep saying one last thing on content repurposing. This is fantastic to splinter out pieces of content, not just in the written form. In fact, the written form, I believe, is the hardest and the least flexible when it comes to content repurposing. The absolute king of content repurposing is video. Video is the best because you can splinter that video into text, into audio, or into short snippets for small viral videos. So hopefully viral. Like I said, most people won't see your stuff. So you need to have a good system that is very streamlined and cost effective to do content repurposing well. None of us are Gary Vee. We can't afford to have someone following around us all day long that we pay 6 figures to create content for us. So we, us lowly peasants, need to make sure that we have a streamlined way of doing it. The other thing about this is in the next video on the content tsunami, I'm going to be deep diving into 2 new types of content, which I hope to get to in this video, but I didn't have enough time, and that is the podcast and video. So we're going to be talking about these kings because really podcasts and video, they're the best in class in different ways. And depending on where you're going with your magazine business, what your ultimate goal is, they can be extremely valuable in pretty different ways, actually. So we're going to be talking about doing podcasts and video in the next content tsunami video. But with that said, just remember all this repurposing stuff, while it's good with blogging, it's really good with podcasts, even better with video. Those 2 pieces of content, if you could only repurpose one aspect of your magazine, you want to repurpose those. Those are going to give you the best bang for your buck because they're inherently more social and more accessible to people across social media, especially since people have short attention spans, right? I mean, right now, as I'm doing this video, there is a huge renaissance, well, I shouldn't say renaissance, a surgence of 30-second micro videos that are absolutely killing it. That's unfortunate because I'm, as you know, long-winded. So I'll see you in the next video of the Content Tsunami Part 2. Talk to you soon. Bye.